everyone, this is Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Now today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make this child size poncho. It's a rectangle style poncho and we've updated the pattern to include 3 sizes. There is a toddler size that'll fit a 2 to 4-year-old. There's a child size that'll fit a 5 to 7-year-old. And then we've also included a youth size that will fit an 8 to 10-year-old. Now this is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. And be sure you do check out that pattern so that you can double check all your stitch counts as well. What you're going to need to make one of the ponchos is some worsted weight medium number 4 yarn. Now the yarn that I'm going to be using is from Hobium yarns, and I'll put that link down in the notes under the video so you can go and check out their website and look at all their wonderful yarns. Now this one is similar to some of the cake yarns that I already have. The yarn has lots of beautiful colors already striping through it, so I won't be changing colors in the project. This is called Jersey, and it's 80% acrylic and 20% wool, which is a fantastic combination that works great for ponchos. You'll need about 4 to 5, maybe even 6 ounces, depending on what size poncho that you're going to make. You'll need a couple of decorative buttons if you want to add just a little extra fun to your poncho. You'll need your needle. The crochet hook we're using today is a 5.00 millimeter crochet hook, and of course you'll need your scissors. We're going to be starting the poncho by chaining the amount of chains we need for the width of the poncho. If you're making the toddler size, which is the small size, you're going to need to chain 45 chains. I'm going to be making the medium size, and the medium size you'll need to chain 55 chains. And then if you're going to make the large size, you're going to need to chain 65 chains. So there's 45, 55, or 65, depending on what size that you're making. We'll begin with our slip knot, and then we'll chain. And like I said, I'm making the medium size, so I'm going to chain 55 chains. I've chained my 55 chains. I'm going to begin in the second chain from the hook and stitch a single crochet. Now don't count the loop that's on your hook. You count the first chain and then the second. We'll go in the second chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both of those loops. And we're going to place a single crochet in each of the single crochets across. And since we started in the second chain from the hook, you're going to have one less chain or one less single crochet than you started with. So if you're making the small size, you'll have 44 single crochets. If you're doing the medium size like I am, I'll have 54 single crochets. And then if you're doing the large size, you'll have 64 single crochets. And you can look at that and measure and see if that looks like the width that you need for your child. And it's up to you. Some people like their ponchos to hang off their shoulders. Some people don't for this particular style. So I'm going to continue stitching one single crochet in each of the chains across. Then I'll chain 3. I've completed one single crochet in each chain across, and I'm going to chain 3. And this chain 3 counts as our first double crochet of our next row. We're going to double crochet in the next stitch, chain 2. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches and then double crochet in the next 2. And this is the way this row will work. Chain 2, skip 2, and 1 double crochet in the next 2. Chain 2, skip 2, and 1 double crochet in the next 2. And this is the same for all sizes. Chain 2, skip 2, 1 double crochet in the next 2. And we'll continue this all the way across our row. Chain 2, skip 2, 1 double crochet in the next 2. When you get to the end of your row, you should have 1 double crochet in the last 2 stitches. We're going to chain 3 and turn. And again, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and it will on every row. We're going to double crochet in the double crochet. Then we'll place 2 double crochets in this chain 2 space. And the chain 2 space is just the hole that's left when we chain 2. So we'll go right in there and stitch 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. Chain 2. And then we'll go to the next chain 2 space and stitch 2 double crochets. And chain 2. And we'll repeat this all the way across, stitching 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space and chain 2. Moving all the way across this row. 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space. Just like that, moving across our row. Two double crochets in the chain 2 space and chain 2. Repeat the rest of the way across your row. When you get to the end of your row, you'll have those 2 double crochets in that last chain 2 space, and then you stitch 1 double crochet in those last 2 stitches. And so on this row, you're going to have 4 double crochets at the end, just like we did at the beginning of this row, where we had our chain 3, double crochet, and then 2 double crochets in that first chain 2 space. Alrighty, now we're going to chain 3 and turn our work. And again, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. So we'll double crochet in the next double crochet. We'll chain 2 and then stitch 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. And we're going to repeat this all across this row. Chain 2, 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space. Chain 2 and 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. And we'll repeat this all the way across our row. Chain 2, 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space, repeat all the way across this row. We've repeated our 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 spaces. We've done our last chain 2, and we're going to double crochet in the last 2 stitches. And chain 3. And now we're going to turn our work. And this is how that it should look at this point. So what we're going to be doing to continue the front of our poncho is we're going to be repeating rows 3 and 4, alternating back and forth. Now, for the small size, you're going to do that for 12 more rows. For the medium size, you'll repeat row 3 and 4, alternating for 15 more rows. And for the large size, you'll repeat row 3 and 4 for 19 more rows. Now, I do suggest once you get the rows done for your size that you measure to see if that length is good, because that will be the front of your poncho. And once we repeat those rows for the amount needed for our size, I'll show you how to add the rows for the hole for your head. So just to repeat, for the small, repeat row 3 and 4 for 12 more rows. For the medium, repeat row 3 and 4 for 15 more rows. And for the large, repeat row 3 and 4 for 19 more rows. I've completed the amount of rows that I need, and you can see that my yarn changed colors. Isn't that pretty? That's a beautiful gold color. And once you've got the amount of rows that you need, we're going to stitch a solid row of double crochets. And this is just going to give us a nice solid row so that we can do the neck hole. All right, so I've got my chain 3 here, 1, 2, and you do one more. I'll do a double crochet in the double crochet. I'll stitch 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. Now, it depends on which row you ended on, if you have the 4 together or you have the 2 together. But either way, it's exactly the same as far as the amount of stitches that you need, because you're going to have the same amount of stitches across for every row, and you should have 54 for every row if you're doing the medium. If you're doing the small, you'll have 44, and if you're doing the large, of course, you'll have 64. And what you'll do is you'll place a double crochet in each of the double crochets, and you'll place 2 double crochets in each of the chain 2 spaces. And what this will do is give us a nice even row of double crochet stitches so that we have a row to work that hole for our head. Or should I say for the little girl's head, because this isn't an adult poncho, this is a child's poncho. So I'm just working across, stitching 1 double crochet in each double crochet and 2 double crochets in each of the chain 2 spaces. And again, it doesn't matter which row you ended on. If you added more rows, you may have ended with the 4 together. And if you added, you may also end with 2. It doesn't matter. Both work exactly the same. You just make sure you put a double crochet in each double crochet and a chain and 2 double crochets in the chain 2 spaces so that you have a nice solid row of double crochets working across. So once again, I'm stitching 2 double crochets in the chain 2 spaces and 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets across. I stitched that solid row of double crochets. I chained 3 and I turned. And remember, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet of our next row. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch some double crochets. We're going to chain and then skip some in the middle and then join back in and double crochet on the other side of that chain. All right, now, so what we're going to do If you're making the small size, you're going to need 14 double crochets. So your chain 3 counts as your first, and then you'll stitch 13 more for a total of 14 on this side. If you're making the medium size, you're going to have your 1 double crochet because your chain 3 counts as your first, and then you're going to need to stitch 15 more double crochets. If you're making the large, you're going to need 19. So I'm just trying to help you remember that your chain 3 counts as your first double crochet. And since I'm making the medium, I'm going to stitch 15 double crochets. So just to repeat, for the small on this side, you need 14. For the medium, you need 16. And for the large, you need 19. And just make sure that you count that chain 3 as your first double crochet. And since I'm making the medium, I'm stitching 16 double crochets, counting my chain 3. All right, let's see how many I have so far. So here's my chain 3. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Here's 14. Here's 15. And 16. All right, so now that's the one side of the shoulder. Now I'm going to chain to make the head hole. So if you're making the small, you're going to need to chain 16. If you're making the medium, you're going to need to chain 22. And if you're making the large, you'll need to chain 26. And I suggest you chain these just a little bit loose because we're going to be coming back through and placing double crochets in that chain. So I'm making the medium, so I'm going to chain 22 chains. There's 10. Oops. There's 22, and I'm going to count to make sure I've got the right amount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I'm one short. Make sure you don't twist your chain. And you're going to skip the same number of double crochets as you chained. So if you're making the small, you're going to skip 16 double crochets. If you're making the medium, you're going to skip 22. And if you're making the large, you're going to skip 26. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So here's my next one, and I've got it marked there with my thumb, and I'm going to stitch a double crochet right in that stitch. All right, and then I'm going to finish with having the same number on this side as I had on this side so that it's even. So I have to stitch 15 more because I've got one there, and I need 16. And again, if you're making the small, you're going to need to have 14 double crochets in total on this side. Medium 16 and the large 19. This row right here is the most complicated of this pattern. And if you've got this row done and figured out, you won't have any trouble with this pattern at all. I pulled the camera out so that you could see how this should look. You should have the same number of double crochets over here that you have over here. You should have the same number of chains as you did where you skipped. All right, and just to make sure you understand, for the small size you should have 14 double crochets and 16 chains, 14 double crochets, and of course you have the same number skipped here as you do chains. For the medium size you should have 16 double crochets, 22 chains, and 16 double crochets, which is what I have because I'm making the medium size. In the large size you should have 19 double crochets, 26 chains and 26 skips, and 19 double crochets. And this will give you the same total that you began with, because with the small you should have 44 stitches altogether. With the medium you should have 54, and with the large you should have 64 stitches. All right, now for the next row we're going to be stitching another row of solid double crochets. So we'll double crochet in each of the double crochets, we'll double crochet in each of the chains, and then we'll double crochet in each of the double crochets on this side, and that will give us our nice hole to be able to slide the child's head through. I've already chained 3, and so I'm going to go in the next double crochet and stitch a double crochet in each of the double crochets across. And it looks like my yarn is changing colors again. I absolutely love these yarns that change colors like this. A lot of people don't care for them, but I love them. All right, I'm almost finished with this first side of double crochets. Alrighty. Now I'm going to stitch a double crochet in each of the chains. And this can be a little tricky and easy to lose your stitches. So what I want you to do is make sure that you count and that you have the right amount of stitches, because if you add or subtract by accident some stitches here, it will mess up the second half of the poncho, because we're going to go back to doing these stitches on the other side. We're basically going to repeat what we did from the beginning. All right, so I'm going to continue stitching 1 double crochet in each of these chains, and then I'll also stitch 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets on the other side of my poncho. And again, your stitch count should be the same as you've been doing. The small, 44, the medium, 54, and the large, 64. So now that we completed this row, we have a solid row of double crochets again. We're going to chain 3, and again, this chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We're going to turn our work, and now we're going to repeat what we did on this side right here. We're going to begin with those 2 double crochets, skip 2, chain 2, 2 double crochets, just like we did at the beginning, because basically we're going to be repeating those rows. So my chain 3 counts as my first double crochet, then I double crocheted in the next, chain 2, skip 2, and then 1 double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Chain 2 and repeat. Skip 2, 1 double crochet in the next 2. And again, we will repeat this pattern across this row. 1 double crochet in the next 2, chain 2, skip 2, 1 double crochet in the next 2, chain 2, skip 2, repeat all the way across this row. So I completed that row. It's exactly like the row we did here at the beginning. And we're going to repeat what we did on this side on this side. So I'm going to turn. My chain 3 counts as my first double crochet, a double crochet in the next stitch, then I'll stitch 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space, chain 2 and 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. And again, we'll do this all the way across like we did on the other side. Chain 2 and 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. Chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. And again, we'll repeat it all the way across. I did those last 2 double crochets in the last chain 2 space, and then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in the last 2. Chain 3 and turn. And then we'll do what we did on the other side again. 1 double crochet in the next because our chain 3 counts as our first. Chain 2 and then 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. And chain 2. And 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. So we're just doing exactly what we did on the beginning on this side. So again, I've completed that next row. Chain 2, skip 2, and put 1 double crochet in the last 2 stitches. And chain 3. Now, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to repeat the amount of rows we did for this size. So, at this point, if you're making the small, you need to repeat these 2 rows for 12 more rows, just like we did on the other side. For the medium, you need to repeat them for 15 rows, just like we did on the other side. And for the large, you'll need to repeat for 19 rows, again, just like we did on this other side. And that's going to make the 2 sides even. Now, sometimes people like to have the back just a little bit longer than the front. And you can do that if you want to. You can add a couple more rows if you would like the back of the poncho to hang just a little bit longer. I'm not going to do that. I like them the same length, I mean. And so I'm going to be repeating these last 2 rows for 15 rows because I'm making the medium size. I have stitched the amount of rows that I need for the back of my poncho. And so now, at the end of this row, we only chained 1. Not 3, just 1. Because we're going to stitch a row of single crochets across. And the way we do that is we're just going to stitch a single crochet in each of the double crochets. And then 2 single crochets in the chain 2 spaces. And if you began this row ending with 2, it's exactly the same, just a single crochet in the 2 double crochets and then 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space. It doesn't matter on which row that you ended, whether with 2 or with 4. The most important thing is that you have the right amount of stitches on that row. So basically what we're doing is stitching a single crochet in each double crochet and 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space. And we're only doing this across the bottom of our poncho. And if you remember, when we began our poncho, we began with a row of single crochets. So we're just stitching a row of single crochets across the bottom, and then we'll do the trim for our poncho. So I finished that row of single crochets across the bottom, and now we're going to do a trim. And the way we're going to do the trim is we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to stitch a double crochet evenly across the sides, and we're going to go up across the top, down the other side, and then back across the bottom and end up here. All right, now the best way to do a double crochet trim when you're working along the sides of the stitches is to try to stitch in the side of the stitches and not the holes. Sometimes you might have to stitch your double crochet in the hole, but you really want to try to stitch in the side of the stitch. It just makes it lay much nicer and more even and less of the gaping holes. And when I'm stitching in rows of double crochet, I try to put 2 double crochets in the side of each stitch. It doesn't always work. Sometimes they're too close, sometimes they're too far apart, but it's a good way to kind of gauge where to put your stitch so that they're nice and even. So what we're doing is we're working all the way up the side of our poncho until we reach the other side. Evenly working double crochets. Take your time. Watch how close they are. Don't let them get too bunchy and don't let them get too far apart. Stitching an even row of double crochet up the side of our poncho. So I've continued working my double crochets up the side, and when you get to that first corner, you want to make sure that you put 3 double crochets in that corner. That way it moves nice and smoothly around that corner. And then we'll go across the bottom, stitching a double crochet in each stitch. And this, of course, is where we began, so those are chains. And that makes it nice and easy to be able to go across the bottom. And so we'll stitch a stitch in each one of those chains. We'll put 3 double crochets in this corner, and then again we'll work up the side of this other side of our poncho till we reach back around to the bottom, and then of course stitch across the bottom as well. So what we're doing again is stitching a double crochet trim all the way around the 4 sides of our poncho. And remember to put 3 double crochets in each corner so it moves nice and smoothly around those corners. I've completed all 4 sides of the trim. I went down the side, across the bottom, back up the other side, and then across the last side there at the bottom or the top. And I've got my 3 double crochets, and I'm going to join to the top of that chain 3 where we started. And we're done. Tie that off, and of course pull that, whoops, there we go, to the inside so that we can weave that in. Now the only other thing that we need to do is decide which is the front and which is the back. Here's one side, it's golden pink, and then here's the other side, it's two-tone teal. And I think I'm going to stick with the pink and gold on the front. And I want to add a couple of buttons just to give it a little extra fun and pizzazz. I've chosen two buttons, a teal because we have some teal on the back, and this pink because we're going to put it right on the top here on the gold. So here's the neck, and I want to make sure that I get it up high. And I'm going to start with the teal. And what I do when I'm sewing on a button is I try to go through stitches, not holes. So I like to go like this. I'm going to pull that string to the back, and I can attach that later. And then I'm just going to mark it. I'm going to put an X there. And then come back up. And this is going to help it stay put. And it's also going to help me put it in the right spot. All right. This is a 2-hole button. So I'm going to go right down, making sure I go through stitches and not holes. And this button is not going to be used to go through a buttonhole. So I'm not going to worry about stitching a bunch of thread through it. So I'm just going to do enough that I know that it's going to stay put. I think I'll do one more if I can get thread through there. And you'll notice I matched the thread to my button, not to the poncho. And that's because I'd like it to kind of not stand out. I want the button to be the star, not the thread. All right, let me move that pink one out of the way. I'll go to the back. And I'm going to tie 3 knots. 1, there's 2, and there is 3. Now, when I'm putting on buttons, sometimes I'll add a dot of fray check or fabric glue, and I'll just add just a little right to that dot of where the knot is, just a little dab, not much, and I'll let that dry, and that will just help it stay put and the knot come undone. All right, so I got some pink yarn here, and I always try to sew with yarn onto a yarn item. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing, decide where I want it. I think I want it like right about there. So I'm going to go through these stitches, make a couple stitches, then I've got my tail of yarn back here to tie with. And again, stitch through until I'm confident that that button is going to stay put. And again, these are decorative buttons, so I don't have to worry about them having to go through buttonholes. But the key is to make sure you get through stitches and not through holes so that it stays put. Alrighty, so I'm going to go over to the back of this one. And again, I'm going to tie 3 knots. I don't know why I go with 3, but it's what I always do. And of course, I've said in the past, that's what my grandmother always did on my grandpa's shirts. There we go. And then I'll put another dab of glue on there. Now, make sure that dries real good before you wear that, or it'll get on their clothes. But that's how we make our child's poncho. And remember, it has 3 sizes, and you don't have to use buttons. You can use crochet flowers, bows, ribbons, whatever you want to do to dress up your poncho.